calls for stronger international measures to curb Houthi escalation. Houthis continue to block efforts to extend the UN blocker truce. Houthis attack with drones Ma'rib province and leave casualties among government forces. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Yemen has renewed calls on the international community to take stronger measures against the recent Houthi escalation. Houthis have intensified attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. This report gives more details.
The Yemeni government renewed its call for stronger international stances against Houthi terrorism and welcomed the latest European Union statement on the co-escalation. The Yemeni statement praised the Union's appreciation for the constructive approach of the Presidential Leadership Council (PLC) during the humanitarian truce and ongoing efforts by regional actors, notably Saudi Arabia and Oman, on the ceasefire extension to increase its humanitarian and development support and interventions for 2022 and 2023. The government indicated that the disturbing violations referred to the European statement are an approach rooted in the Houthis' practices and beliefs, exceeding all organizations and groups classified on European and international terrorist lists, including the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and its terrorist militias in the region. The government said that the international community should take a firm stance in classifying the militia as a terrorist organization, noting that it's a peaceful choice that brings peace, stability, and a better future that all Yemenis deserve. The Union affirmed the effort need to be directed towards a sustainable ceasefire and requires support for Grantsburg's proposal for a three-track framework process to achieve a just and inclusive settlement for the conflict in Yemen, with the whole meaningful and equal political participation of women at all levels. The European Union urged the Houthis to abandon maximalist positions, engage constructively with the Special Envoy and stress the importance of the restoring and extending the truce further, and to heed the United Nations Envoy's call for calm and restraint while negotiations continue to renew and extend the truce, retreating that all threats or attacks on civilians or infrastructures such as oil company installations and commercial shipping operating in the region must stop, as well as to release abductees and all persons held unlawfully and arbitrarily.
The Yemeni government has condemned the recent Houthi drone attack that targeted schoolboys in Hajj province, northern Yemen. The Houthi attack killed a boy and injured two others while they were on their way to school. The Farm report has more details.
According to official reports, the Houthi militia in Yemen resumed their violations by targeting a school in Hajj Governorate, killing one child and injuring two others. Yusuf Bishi, 11, was murdered in the Houthi drone strike on the Al Deir village school. Muammar al-Iryani, Minister of Information, Culture and Tourism, strongly denounced the incident, saying that the terrorist Houthi militia's targeting of the school underlined its disrespect for appeals and efforts for peace. Yemen's minister urged the international community, including UN and US envoys and human rights groups, to denounce this horrible act and label it as a war crime and a crime against humanity. He demanded that the leaders and elements of the Houthis, including those on international terrorist lists, be prosecuted and held accountable. According to UNICEF, over 11,000 children have been killed or wounded as a result of the violence in Yemen, an average of 4 children per day, since the conflict erupted in 2015. The United Nations confirmed the deaths of 3,774 children and the recruitment of 9,995 children, including 91 girls, into battle. Meanwhile, the Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedoms recorded around 127,000 Houthi breaches that led to the death and injury of about 48,000 civilians during an 8-year period. The network stated on Human Rights Day that Houthi mines have killed and injured over 9,800 civilians, including 1,388 children. It accused the militias of detaining and kidnapping almost 17,000 citizens, over 4,000 of whom are still detained. The Network for Rights and Freedoms asked that the Security Council and the international community promptly add the Houthi movement to the list of terrorist organizations in order to safeguard Yemenis from their terrorism. Additionally, it demanded that the organization be held accountable for violating international humanitarian law, human rights treaties.
The U.S. Senate postponed the vote of the World Powers resolution to end the conflict in Yemen. This decision would stop any U.S. support or participation in the war in Yemen, including providing logistical and security cooperation. Efforts to renew Yemen's truce failed due to the Houthi rejection. The rebels have imposed conditions on the government which can never be met. Such conditions were described by the U.S. Special Envoy as being maximalist. The following report has more on this.
Attempts to extend the truce in Yemen have failed due to Houthi stubbornness, a refusal of repeated calls for a peaceful solution to Yemen's crisis. According to experts, the Houthi policy is closely related to their ally Iran, which itself is currently proceeding cautiously due to its domestic environment. Since 2014, Yemen has been caught in a war between the legitimate government backed by the Arab coalition on the one side and the Houthis backed by Iran on the other. This war has killed hundreds of thousands of people and, according to the United Nations, has caused the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. On April 2022, a truce between the warring parties started to partially alleviate the suffering of Yemenis, who had experienced a horrific 7-year war that has pushed the country to the verge of famine. The truce ended in October, after having been extended twice, and each time for 2 months. Now 2 months have passed since the end of the truce, and the military and political situation remains much the same as it was during the truce. Houthis rejected the plan of the United Nations Special Envoy to Yemen, Hans Grunberg, to extend the truce. The most important reason for the Houthis' rejection of the truce was the payment of all salaries of employees in the military and civilian corps in the areas under their control. From the point of view of the legitimate government, this payment would represent a blank check of support for the Houthi militia. The current standstill situation may continue for a while, but Yemen remains nonetheless in the conflict, and violence could escalate at any moment. The Houthis are likely to escalate in Ma'rib and Taz, because the former is the energy stronghold of the government, and the latter is a city which, although besieged by the Houthis for a long time, remains a shockhold for them. Despite all that, the biggest loser from not extending the truce and finding a final political solution in Yemen will be the Yemeni people, who suffer from combined humanitarian and social crises.
The Yemeni government discussed with the United Nations ways of securing UN missions working in the country. This comes days after a UN convoy was ambushed east of Ma'rib and resulted in the death and injury of 6 soldiers who were escorting the convoy.
لما وديته مركز الصحي بدي يندل لي تغذية يندل له علاجات يصرف له بديته أنديله بدي يتحسن وضعه على ما كان مرة حد حقه عنده تغذية.
يعني في الوقت الحالي مع غلاء المعيشة يلا يكفي. الحوالات هذه اللي نستلمها من المنظمة يعني تنفع، يعني في حالة الضيق تفك لك الضيق.
أشتغل يوما في الأسبوع، صح إن أنا أشتغل بناء، أشتغل يوما في الأسبوع، والسلة هذا توفر عن مصاريف كثيرة، ولو قلنا على قدر المشقية مش تكفيش حتى أسبوع. هذه هي زي ما تقول فترة حرب، لو ما ينتهي الحرب شي يصير كل واحد يطلب الله على نفسه وعلى أهله وعلى عائلته وعلى كل حاجة.
The United States has announced $5 million reward for sharing information on a senior leader of Al-Qaeda organization in Yemen. The State Department published the rewards in exchange for providing information on Asaam al-Banna, known as Abu Ayman al-Masri. In Ma'rib, 2 government soldiers were killed and 3 others injured in a Houthi drone attack. Local sources said that the Houthi drone targeted a military site in Ma'rib, killing 2 soldiers and wounding 3 others. Three people were killed and others injured after violent clashes between military forces and tribal gunmen in Ma'rib Governorate. Local sources said that the clashes broke out after the tribesmen blocked the road in order to demand oil derivatives for a fuel station owned by them. Coming next. Rights groups accuse Houthis of torturing prisoner till death and concealing his death from family.
أنا خارج ألعب جهة أصحابي وهو الرمو علينا إن إحنا لو نرمو قعلي أصحابي صاروا يدعوا أصحاب المخيم بزين يصحوا شايفين. صعب إن معي شي رجل ما أقدرش ألعب مع أصحابي أبقى داخل ألعب بالليل.
أصلاً الولد ما لعب ما بذنبه أي حاجة، ولما يشوف أصحابه يلعبوا وهما برجل واحدة يتعقد الولد على الحركات والصوت. هذا أثر علينا كلنا، الوالدة والوالد.
كنت قاعدة نروح المصيف، كنت ألعب كورة وأجري برجلي وألعب مع أصحابي، بعدين أبي صغير والآن ما أقدرش.
Welcome back. A recent human rights report revealed that the Iranian-backed Houthi militia committed more than 2,500 violations against medical personnel in facilities in Ma'rib Governorate. According to the report, the violations included bombing, killing, injury, kidnapping, and depriving more than 600 citizens of health care. Rights groups have accused the Houthis of torturing a prisoner till death. The family of a prisoner found his body in Sana'a hospital more than 2 years after his death. The sources confirmed that marks of torture have been seen on the prisoner. This report has more on it.
Humanitarian violations against civilians and journalists have been increased and require powerful authorities' intervention. A Yemeni human rights group and relatives have accused the Iran-backed Houthi of torturing and killing a prisoner of war and then for years concealing his death from family. The Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedoms said that Omar Ahmad al-Sami'i, a Yemeni government fighter seized from a battlefield in the province of Sada in 2018, was mercilessly tortured before being murdered. The militia group later told his family that he was being held in jail. But when his parents traveled from Taiz city to Sana'a to see their son, the Houthis escorted them to 48 Model Hospital and showed them his body. It was then that the relatives spotted clear signs of torture. A medical report showed that al-Sami'i has passed away on November 16, 2020. Nevertheless, the Houthis continued to demand money from his family to make them believe that he was still alive. According to the network, when Omar was in jail, the Houthi jail superintendent repeatedly asked the victim's family for expenditures for their son Omar, despite the fact that Omar has died 2 years ago as a consequence of electric shock torture. Meanwhile, Reporters Without Borders (RSF) warned that 3 Yemeni journalists jailed by the Houthis could soon die after being placed in solitary confinement and tortured for weeks. The threesome among 4 journalists sentenced to death by a Houthi-run court 2 years ago and had been been separated from other prisoners and beaten, and it urged international mediators to assist in their release. Houthi violations have reached Yemeni civilians and also pressed representatives using reporters as hostages to gain leverage in negotiations. Calls and efforts for calm and peace are what the people and the international voices demand regarding renewing the truce.
Houthi landmines continue to pose a real threat on Yemenis. The victims of landmines are facing a constant nightmare due to injuries they have sustained. This report has more details.
In Hodeidah, thousands of disabled victims of Houthi landmines suffer because they lost parts of their bodies and became disabled, unable to provide for their families. Dozens of Houthi mine victims in the Dahami Plain organized a protest, demanding complete transparency and a probe into UN agencies' involvement in assisting the Houthi militia in placing mines and explosives. Abdu Ahmed from the Hais countryside recalls the wounds he received as a result of a Houthi mine that nearly killed him.
While herding sheep, I stumbled across landmines that severed my hands and wounded part of my scalp. I can hardly move.
The horror does not end there. The Houthis and their mines showed no pity to Haj Muhammad Olayan's modest condition or elderly age. A mine exploded when he was riding his motorcycle to support his family and he lost his left foot.
I was crossing aboard my motorcycle when I came across a landmine.
Today, Haj Olayan leans on crutches like dozens of other disabled people who are waiting for relief, hoping to get a prosthetic limb at Hais Rural Hospital. Mines planted in the farms, roads, and homes of civilians turned thousands into victims and left them in great spiritual isolation.
We call upon the United Nations to investigate members' involvement in funding Houthi operations.
To date, victims have not gotten a fair trial for those implicated in and supporting the Houthis' mine-laying operations, which has led the group to continue killing Yemenis in cold blood.
The Yemeni Banks Association in Sana'a warned of any Houthi attempt to target the banking sector. Banking sources estimated that the total money that the Houthi militia seeks to control is nearly 15 trillion riyals. The International Energy Agency said that global oil demand growth will slow next year, but will still be at a robust 1.7%. According to the agency, the slowness in the oil demand is due to a contraction in oil demand of China. It noted also that Russia's oil output will fall by 1.4 million barrels per day next year. The Yemeni Students' Association in the Russian capital Moscow said the funeral for Dr. Abu Bakr al-Saqqaf, Yemen's great thinker, was held on Thursday morning. The association stated in a statement that the condolences will be received at the Yemeni embassy. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Government calls for stronger international measures to curb Houthi escalation. Houthis continue to block efforts to extend the UN brokered truce. Houthis attack with drones Ma'rib province and leave casualties among government forces. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.